Hi, I'm Chris Howard, manager at Alexandre Family Farm. I'm excited to talk to you today about a restoration project on Tryon Creek and how it supported overwintering habitat for coho salmon. Of interest to many scientists, including myself, over time we've studied Salmonid and their critical habitats here on the Pacific Northwest. With the Smith River listed as critical habitat for the species, especially coho salmon, which we have a great deal of concern with, as a listed threatened species in our watershed, we pay particular attention to it here in our areas of the Smith River and especially Tryon Creek. So the Smith River watershed is one of the most important salmon strongholds in the United States. And the Smith River itself provides a critical habitat for these species throughout the watershed. Over the decades, as farming practices went conventional, some of these important habitats in the estuary were either degraded or destroyed or filled in by catastrophic flooding. Over time, these areas have become more important to the species as habitats to actually overwinter in. And the importance of this, especially for salmon, is escaping velocity in the winter. And velocity from large winter flows sometimes causes fish to prematurely get washed out to the ocean. And with that, we have a situation where they can't escape these high waters. So when we create habitat, especially here on Alexandre Family Farm, the habitat is created with velocity refuge in mind, especially for endangered species like the California coho salmon, a species that overwinters in fresh water before it outmigrates to the ocean. And with the coho salmon, it's critical for them to have slow water moving habitat. And we here at Alexandre Dairy have taken a creek like here behind us, Tryon Creek, and placed it into one of these areas where we've deepened the water on a very subtle estuarine stream and allowed the fish to come up into our watershed and thrive here. And that's been extremely important to the survival of the species. Tryon Creek wasn't always like this. There was no trees around it. Much of it had been removed for agricultural purposes in the past 100 years. And what you see here today is a habitat that was being created and dredged to allow depth in the habitat. Trees have been replanted to provide shade over the watercourse and allow the fish an ability to escape during high winter flows. And what's critical here in Alexandre Dairy as a regenerative agricultural farm is that these soils and what they produce, especially for critters like earthworms, when you have a perfect combination of soils and habitat, and the earthworms have soils to feed in, they sometimes sneak themselves out here into this freshwater environment. And those coho that overwinter here have a great food source. As a matter of fact, in this watershed, we have worked with our partners from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and NOAA Marine Fisheries to study coho salmon that have come up into our watershed. We've actually captured these fish in upper parts of the Smith River watershed. We've inserted what they call a pit tag into these fish and recaptured them here when they come downstream and escape into our watershed during high winter flows. And what we found is that fish that were raised here in our streams on Tryon Creek grow almost twice as large as fish that came from their natal stream at Mill Creek upriver in the Smith River watershed. Over the last 20 years, we've really focused a great deal of attention on bringing this restorative picture back to our estuarine creek and in bringing coho salmon back up here so it can survive in perpetuity and, more importantly, use these areas as velocity refuge during their winter. And we've had a great deal of success working with our partners, the California Department of Fish and Game and NOAA Marine Fisheries Service, in providing this critical refugia for coho salmon. In essence, this would not be a practice that a conventional farming operation might consider, but it's a practice we here at Alexandre Family Farm have felt very important as we work with nature, not against it, to rebuild what was here once, not only so we could have these great lush grasses to graze our cows on, but live symbiotically with those around us, and especially those critters that call this place home.